hang upside down for 60 seconds and your face goes hot, your head starts to pound, and your whole body begs you to flip back over. Now imagine you can't. Imagine you have slid head first into a crack in the rock roughly 10 inches high and 18 inches wide, about the size of a flower pot, and your shoulders have jammed, and the harder you struggle, the deeper you wedge. And you stay like that, head down, for 27 hours. This happened. It happened about 15 minutes crawl from the entrance, to a man who was never more than a few hundred feet from open sky. And I want to tell you this story properly, because almost everything you have heard about it is wrong, including, and I mean this, the ending. His name was John Edward Jones. He was 26 years old, a second-year medical student, a husband and a father. His wife was called Emily. They had a 1-year-old daughter, and Emily was pregnant with their second child. It was the week of Thanksgiving 2009, and John was home in Utah with his family. And on the Tuesday night, he and his brother Josh and about 9 other relatives and friends went out to a cave west of Utah Lake called Nutty Putty. That is how this begins. Not an expedition, not a stunt. A family outing on a holiday week. Let me tell you why being upside down is the whole story. Because most people hear trapped and think of it as uncomfortable. It is not uncomfortable. It is lethal, and it is lethal on a clock. When you invert a human body and leave it there, gravity stops being neutral and becomes an executioner. Blood that your heart normally pumps upward now pools into your head, and it stays there, and the pressure builds behind your eyes and inside your skull. But the thing that actually kills you is your breathing. Standing up, your diaphragm drops, and your lungs fill without you thinking about it. Upside down, the entire weight of your own organs presses down onto your lungs, and every breath becomes a deliberate fight against your own body. You are not suffocating because there is no air. You are suffocating because you can no longer do the work of pulling it in. Doctors call it positional asphyxia. It is not a fast death, and it is not a merciful one. Now, here is where I have to correct the story you have probably been told. John Jones was not a seasoned caver. He is often described that way, and it isn't true. And the truth matters more. He had caved as a boy, with his father. He had not done it in years. He had never been inside Nutty Putty before. He was 6 feet tall and around 190 pounds, and the official caving report into what happened says it plainly. He was very large for the passage he was in. What he was looking for was a passage called the birth canal. It is a real part of that cave, and it is tight, and people go through it, but John did not find the birth canal. In the dark, he found a different opening, an unmapped, unmarked dead end that was not on any survey, that went nowhere at all, and he went into it head first, and he kept going. Downward, at least 30 feet, into a slot that got narrower the further he went. The passage ran downhill at around 60 to 70 degrees, steep enough that gravity was helping him in, steep enough that gravity would not help him out. And at some point in that descent, the rescuers later concluded, he slipped. He popped through the tightest part of the constriction with gravity behind him, and when they first made contact with him, he could not remember doing it, which suggests he struck his head on the way down. He came to his senses jammed head down in a crack in the earth, on his left shoulder, left arm crushed underneath his own body, the other arm pinned at his side. And his body so completely filled the passage that no rescuer for the next 27 hours would ever be able to reach any part of him above the waist. They could touch his legs. That was all. That was all they would ever have. He could not back out. This is the part people struggle with. Why not just reverse? Because to reverse out of a head-down squeeze, you have to push yourself uphill, against gravity, using your arms, and his arms were pinned beneath him and behind him. He had nothing to push with and nothing to push against. Every time he exhaled, his chest shrank, and he slid a fraction deeper. Every time he inhaled, the rock was already there. The cave was not crushing him. He was crushing himself, one breath at a time, with the help of the planet. His family could not free him. By 10 o'clock that night, they had called for help, and the Utah County Sheriff's search and rescue teams began to arrive. What grew out of that phone call was one of the largest cave rescues in American history. Before it was over, roughly 137 people would work on this. Sheriff's deputies, professional cave rescuers, volunteer cavers, firefighters, paramedics. And of those 137, only about 6 human beings ever physically reached him. The passage was too small for anyone else to matter. The first was a woman named Susie Motola. Small, wiry, and calm, she was roped by the ankles so the team could haul her back out if she got stuck. And she went down into that crack head first, because head first was the only way anyone could go. She reached him after midnight. She talked to him. She stayed with him for about 2 hours. And what she found is the detail that I cannot get out of my head. John Jones, upside down in the dark, with the blood pooling in his skull, was polite. He apologized for the trouble. He asked about his wife. Another rescuer, Rob Stillmar, a man who had pulled people out of this exact cave before, went in after her, worked at John's legs, moved him a little, and then got stuck himself on the way out and had to be rescued. That is the size of the problem. The passage was eating the rescuers too. By morning, there were 100 people on that hillside. John had been upside down for 12 hours by then, and he was conscious, and he was talking, actively working with the men at his feet, doing what he could with a body that was slowly filling with its own fluid. They fed him water and Gatorade through an oxygen hose. A rescuer named Ryan Schertz spent hours with him, rubbing his leg, talking to him, speaking a little Spanish with him, talking about their shared faith, keeping him with them. And meanwhile, they built the only machine that could possibly work. They rigged a rope and pulley haul system, a 3-to-1 mechanical advantage, anchored 50 feet back up the passage, and because the crawl twisted and turned, the rope had to run through a series of deviation pulleys, bending the pull around the corners of the rock. The friction was so severe that they eventually ran a second haul line so that each of his legs had its own system. They chipped at the rock. They dug. They poured peanut oil into the passage to lubricate it. They never once got a strap around his waist, because they could never reach his waist. Everything, every ounce of force in that entire operation had to be applied to a man's ankles and shins to pull him uphill out of a hole he had fallen into, head first. And after about 19 hours, it very nearly worked. They moved him. Not far, but they moved him. And word went up the hill and out into the world that John Jones was coming out. Then the rigging failed. The final deviation pulley had been anchored to a natural bridge of rock, and that rock had a sharp back edge, and under load, hour after hour, that edge had been quietly sawing through the anchor rope. It parted. The system came apart under full tension, and steel, carabiners' pulleys, was fired backward into Ryan Schertz's face. It knocked him unconscious. It gashed his face open and partially severed his tongue. He would need reconstructive surgery. He would, remarkably, recover completely, and he walked out of that cave under his own power. And John slid back down, about a foot. I want to be very careful here, because this is the single most misreported fact of this entire case. You have probably heard that John Jones was freed, that he was on his way out, and that the rope broke and dropped him all the way back to the bottom. Television reported it that way at the time. It is not true. The official caving report is blunt about it. Nothing could have been further from the truth. He was never free, not for 1 second. In 27 hours, the rigging failure did not undo a rescue. It cost them a foot of ground, and it cost them their rescuer, and it cost them more than an hour of re-rigging, while a man with a failing heart hung upside down in the dark waiting for them to come back. And in that hour, John stopped answering. When they got the system running again, the man on the other end of the rope was no longer helping them. He had been the engine of his own rescue for 20 hours, bracing, pushing, working with them, and now he was dead weight in a slot that fit him exactly. One of the rescuers described what it was like to try to haul him then, like trying to push a cork back into an upturned bottle, and they could hear his breathing change. It turned gurgly. That sound is fluid. His lungs were filling. Between 10 o'clock and midnight on Wednesday the 25th of November, 2009, John Edward Jones died in that crack in the rock. He had been upside down for around 27 hours. He was about 400 feet from the entrance of the cave, and roughly 15 minutes of easy crawling from the daylight. His heart, after a full day of pumping against a column of his own blood, simply stopped. They could not get him out, not alive, and not afterwards. 2 days later, the authorities ruled that recovering his body would very likely kill somebody else. The same rock, the same angle, the same trap, and now a body that could not help. The family agreed. And on the 9th of December, 2009, crews brought in explosives, collapsed the passages around him, and filled every entrance of Nutty Putty Cave with concrete. The cave is sealed. He is still inside it. That hillside is his grave, and there is a plaque on it with his name. and a second plaque beside it for the men and women who tried. So what is the lesson? Not the one the internet usually draws. This is not a story about panic, because John Jones did not panic. He was calm. He was kind to the people trying to save him for 20 hours while inverted in a rock crack, and it made no difference at all. He did everything right after he was stuck. That is the horror of it. There are situations that do not care how well you behave in them. The lesson is earlier than that, and it is brutally simple, and every caver alive can recite it. Never commit your body headfirst, downhill, into a passage you have not seen the end of, and cannot reverse out of. Keep away back. The moment you cross that line, in a cave or anywhere else, you have handed the decision to gravity and geology, and neither of them negotiates. John crossed it in the dark, in a passage that was not on the map, because he thought he was somewhere else. And the last thing I want to leave you with is not the rock, it is the 137. Because people crawled head first into that same trap, on ropes tied to their ankles, knowing exactly what it had already done to the man they were going in after. One of them took a steel pulley to the face and lost part of his tongue for it. They did not save him. They kept trying anyway, for 27 hours, and then they had to walk out of that cave and go home and tell his wife. The rock is indifferent. The people were not. That is the part of this story worth carrying. I want to know what you make of it. He did everything you are supposed to do once you are trapped. He stayed calm. He stayed still. He worked with his rescuers, and it wasn't enough. So does that change what you think survival actually is? Tell me in the comments. If this one stayed with you, hit like so more people find it, and subscribe before you go, because the next one is about a diver who went into a flooded sinkhole and what the people on the surface heard on his